All right, so today we're going to talk about data science resume, specifically on the section on technical projects. So I've linked this here as well. Whenever you speak to your career coach, I think this is the template that they send you. I'm not sure if they have a more updated one by now, but this is what it's going to look like. Very, very bare bones, literally like no actual information, but this shows you the structure of what a data science resume should look like. I think the main difference is you have this whole technical project section that regular resumes would not have. I will also say that as you get more and more experience in the field, this section can get smaller and you can talk about like the actual like data work that you're doing at your company through employment history. So over time, as you get more into the data science space, this section is going to shrink, this section is going to grow. But just for right now, your prior employment experience will be a little bit less relevant. So therefore, having this technical project section is important. And I will say like the career coaches do a really, really good job at explaining like, or at vetting what you say under employment history, under education, under like all of these things. Me less so. The main things that I really look out for are like how you phrase and how you talk about your project. So I'm going to focus a lot more on that today. So before you even set that up, I would say pick your 3 projects that you want on your resume. Very likely it will be probably like your capstone, phase 4, maybe phase 3, maybe phase 2. I myself, I actually have a blurb, or I actually have created like one of these for every one of my projects. And then based on the job, I actually switch them out. So I have actually like a bunch of different versions of resumes. I have like on my computer, I have like maybe like 20 resumes with like different things. I like just keep changing things here and there. And I'm like a digital hoarder, so I save everything. But yeah, and I think if you get the information about a job that they tell you like what kind of work you'll be doing, maybe you want to edit your resume to match that more. I think most commonly people who are going more for like data analyst roles that involve less modeling work, people actually will throw in their phase 1 project to just show that you're able to get to like insight. And I think that phase 1 project is often overlooked, but it's a lot of what data scientists do. So yeah, I would say that's the first step. Start with 3 on your resume. There should be 3. And then, yeah, I once you get used to writing 3, maybe you feel free to send me what you've written and I'm happy to edit. So first pick your projects. I would say you might want variety or not, depending on the roles you want. Now, this is more specifically for, I think there's some people who come into this program thinking like, oh, I want to go into like, for some reason, it's like mostly people who want to do finance and they're like, yeah, I only want to do finance and like time series stuff. And so in that sense, then yeah, sure, all of your projects can be along those lines. It can be like the regression project, because regression is something that's very commonly used in finance. You can do your time series, maybe your capstone is a finance one, then sure, great. You also might want variety. I personally like all my projects are quite different, just because I guess to be a generalist and like you don't want to like what's the word, pigeonhole yourself into any specific role. So you can do that, or you can, you know, as I said, switch it up depending. So yeah, you can definitely switch out projects for specific roles. I've linked the Flatiron template there. If your career coach sends you an updated one, use that one. But for the most part, most resumes that I've seen in the last year do still look like this. Okay, so to talk about how you set up the blurb, I guess, for each project, this is typically what it'll look like. You have your title. And so I highly recommend that if any of your GitHub repos are named Flatiron phase 1 project, or like if they're named, I don't know, like Flatiron regression project, change it such that it's something that is more indicative of the project itself. So if you did like a classification on what was the provider, maybe like you did like customer churn prediction, call it that rather than Flatiron School phase 3 classification project. You want less general names. You want names that are more useful. So, or give it a better sounding title. And then you probably will link the URL. So on PDFs, you can actually hyperlink, or if you do it on Google Docs, at least I'm pretty sure. If you hyperlink it on Google Docs, when you export it as a PDF, the links will still let you click through. So that's really helpful, especially now, like you rarely will print out your resume. I would say only print out your resume if you're going in person for an interview, just in case. But for the most part, it's going to be PDFs. And so they're going to probably click through your links. Here you can have like your subtitle and brief description. I would say definitely you want to have that. And then also one thing that I've noticed a lot of is, and this is an example of one of mine actually. I've noticed that a lot of people don't like change the formatting of this, and it becomes a lot harder to read, especially for someone who's like looking at resumes like as their role. You want to make things as clear as possible. So definitely do some sort of formatting to separate your description from these like bullet points and from your title. The formatting matters. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be like this one bold, this one URL, this one is italicized, but based on how you want to design your resume, I guess, just make it a little bit different. Okay, and then usually there's 3 bullet points. I've seen ones that are 4. It really depends on like how much do you have to say about like your prior job experience, how much do you have to say in terms of education. You can really play around with the length of these. I don't think that you always have to have 3 bullet points. So yeah, I say here, don't say Flatiron School is the name of the project. Don't say like mod whatever or phase whatever. In terms of this subtitle and brief description, I do think it's a good idea to have it match what you have on GitHub if you do. So as an example, let's see, do I have one of my projects? Happy to pull that up. So let's see. If I go here, and I haven't cleaned up my GitHub in a while, but you see how I have like these project descriptions that you can add on GitHub. So you can do that. And then have that match this. And in terms of this description, what to think about, what kind of project is it? So is it an analysis? That would be like for your phase 1, regression, that's phase 2, classification, phase 3, rec system forecasting. So that will be in your description. I would say, I actually like it when it says, so here I say it's a machine learning classifier that predicts blah, 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 blah. I personally like that format. It is very subjective. I do think what's more important is to keep it consistent across all your projects, just so that someone who's reading it can more easily understand the differences in your projects. And then in terms of descriptions, a lot to go through. I'll talk about like some of my like favorite keywords or like my favorite ways of phrasing things, important things that you can make sound more impressive. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And in terms of descriptions, as you're creating these descriptions, it's important to keep in mind that they will see these 3 descriptions together. So you don't want to be repetitive. Even though a lot of our projects have the same process, like we're always doing an EDA followed by modeling, followed by interpretation. You don't need to be repetitive, because if you say that you can do an EDA in one project, you don't need to say that you also did an EDA in those 2 other projects. So just maybe the one project that you didn't do as much of something else, then you can mention your EDA, but you can really spread out your points like that. And yeah, just make sure they're not being repetitive. So this is an example of mine. I will say also with context, like there are 2 other projects that I have on my resume, so this might not sound like very complete, but this one specifically is the only classification project that I have on my resume. And so I have like a classifier that predicts blah, blah, blah. This was like, I think this was my NLP project when I was a student. And of course, on my resume, it's formatted such that each thing is 1 line. But yeah, I talk about the fact that I trained like 9 different classification models for this project, and I evaluated blah, blah, blah. In this case, I also processed the text data, so I talked about that. And then in this case, after I graduated, I went to throw this onto a Flask app. So I decided to mention that for this project. Things that I didn't necessarily mention here, I didn't mention EDA because one of my other projects, I talk about EDA way more. I didn't so much talk about like how my tuning of my model and hyperparameter tuning, how that really improved my result, because that's in another project. So that's just an example of like, you want to spread out your points so that you can talk about more things that you did across your 3 projects. Okay, so to go into some good things to mention, I broke it down into more of like your pre-modeling, during modeling, and like, I guess, miscellaneous things. So in your pre-modeling, some important things that you could mention, the fact that you can deal with large data sets. So if you have a fairly large data set for any of your project, I do think it's a good idea to mention a number. Like here, I talk about that I have 40,000 plus instances of text data. So I said that. Some good buzzwords that you can use if you use like APIs or web scraping, mention those. I really like the word, this is just personal opinion, I really like the word synthesize. As long as you take like two tables and put them together, for example, like that movies project for phase 1, that's you synthesizing a bunch of different data. I like that a lot. If you didn't do like too much work, pre-process is always a good word, because that is something that a lot of data analyst roles want you to be able to do. And then on top of that, if you're using any like specific libraries, again, this depends on how the rest of your resume is set up, but maybe you say pre-processed using pandas or like JSON, stuff like that. I say that because some resumes have this section and some don't. It's really up to you whether you want to or not. But if you do mention that like you have pandas, NumPy here, maybe, especially if you're trying to fit all the words on like one line, maybe you don't have to mention that later on. That's something to think about too. For EDA, derive insights, that's always good, because literally people want data scientists to get insights from their numbers. This phrase I actually really like. I copied this from someone else's resume. Performed an extensive pre-modeling exploratory data analysis on blah, blah, blah. And also perhaps mention the business case if relevant. So let's say for the movies project, if you want to talk about the fact that you came up with actionable insights for a potential movie studio, you could say perform an extensive pre-modeling EDA on blah, blah, blah rows of data to generate actionable insights for potential movie studio, something like that. I think something that as a bootcamp student, you have that strength over like a CS college grad, is that our projects are sort of like trying to mimic real life work projects, if that makes sense. Because I think that this program does put a good emphasis on, a business case that a lot of CS projects in traditional college do not. If you can talk about this as in like, if you can frame it in a way that you are really simulating a real life work and business problem that you aim to solve, I think that will make your resume stand out, especially compared to traditional computer science grads. So those are like the good things to throw in to just show that you can do EDA. For modeling, I do think it is important to have some sort of metric for every single project. I think even when they're talking about your job description for like your past employment, they always tell you to try and quantify as much as possible. I think the same for your project descriptions. It doesn't always have to be straight up like my model performed with this level of accuracy. It can really depend on what you want to highlight. So for example, if you want to highlight the fact that you're able to hyperparameter tune or you're able to iterate on a model, instead of giving a straight up, okay, my RMSE ended up being this after like 10 regression models, you can talk about your percentage increase. So one that I really like is, so this point, if you have a significant increase from a baseline due to tuning or feature engineering, mention that, perform perhaps in the form of a percentage increase if the number sounds more impressive. So for example, let's say I was doing a 5-class classification problem, and the baseline, if I use like a dummy classifier, was like 20% and you raised it to 50, that's a 150% increase. So just mess with the numbers a little like that. It's not a lie, it's true. So do that. Which also, I don't know if y'all worked with the dummy classifier, but it's a scikit-learn classifier that's it's actually pretty neat. If you want to like go back to your project and get like a worse baseline so that you can improve upon, that's a pretty good one. So it's scikit-learn dummy classifier. Dummy classifier. It's basically a random guessing classifier. So it literally says, do not use it for real problems, but it's, let's say you have like an imbalanced data set and you want to see how your recall can improve. This one will start by, let's say you have an 80-20 imbalance, your baseline will be 80%, and then you want to try and improve upon that. So I like this just so you can have some sort of good baseline metric. Of course, what you really want to define as your baseline is really up to you. But if you feel like you did a lot of modeling and it didn't really improve by much, I like to slip this in there like at the end just to show that you have an increase. Some tips and tricks. Also, you can phrase your metrics differently based on your problem. Let's say you don't want to use the word recall because you're afraid that maybe someone who's less technical that's seeing your resume won't know what that means. You can phrase it slightly differently. So based on context, this I think is a pneumonia detection image classification project, I think. Let's say you decided to use recall because it's more important to have fewer false negatives than false positives. No, other way around, whichever one it is. You could, instead of saying recall, say that you correctly diagnosed 97% of pneumonia x-rays in unseen data. So that means you had 97% recall, but you know, this sometimes in context sounds a little bit more impressive and is a lot more like tied to your business case. Some of these projects, you've probably tested a lot of models. If it's more than 4 to 5, literally mentioned the number, like I threw in the number 9 because it sounds like I did a lot of modeling work. If you use fewer, maybe you want to mention which models you tested and ended up using. Perhaps you mentioned somewhere like what your final model was. I think I have naive Bayes here. I forget if I do. There we go. So I achieved like a 97 with the naive Bayes classifier. Again, it really depends on which model you ended up doing. I know Amber likes to take the approach of you pick your models first and then do the process, whereas some modeling you can just like throw all your data at all the models. So depending on which approach you took, maybe you can phrase it slightly differently. Did you build a function to automate the modeling process or the pipeline? Automation is extremely important. I think that's something that within the curriculum itself is not emphasized enough. The fact that you should be able to build a function. If you're doing iterative modeling, especially, you should have a function that you can just run over and over again. And then you maybe feed in like different parameters or different subsets of variables, for example. That's super important because in the real world, they care about reusability of your code and they care about scaling a lot. And this is only something that I learned as I was, interviewing at other companies as well, and also through doing contract work. Like for a lot of people, it's important that things are in function so that you're not writing code just for one-time use, which I feel like a lot of Jupyter Notebook code, because of the format of Jupyter Notebooks, is very easy to just, I'm just going to write this line, run this model, reinstantiate every single time. Fine, sure. But in the real world, especially when you want to use your model for something, they want to see that you're able to do that process. So use the word automated. People like the word pipeline a lot. You can do like end-to-end pipeline if you grab data from some sort of API or web scrape. Maybe in that function you throw it through like pre-processing, throw it through your models, make a prediction, so on and so forth. So yeah, any like sort of automation process, that I think is a good thing to mention. And then did you come up with actionable recommendations for your business case from your model or through post-modeling EDA? So this is slightly different from pre-modeling EDA. For example, like looking at feature importances. Sometimes I think, you can get that feature importances graph, but I do think it's important to go one step further and figure out like, or there's a couple other ways to do it, but basically feature importances don't show you direction. And through a little bit more, like a couple other visualizations, you can easily figure out, okay, well, the word Bitcoin, if used in a tweet, is likely to lead to, I don't know, higher or lower price. You just have to do that one extra step of EDA. to get there. And then sometimes you can even quantify it. If you have like different distributions, you can say, oh, if you use the word Bitcoin, then you have a 50% higher chance of the price going up, something like that. That's just the last project that's on my mind. But yeah, if you derived anything from a model, I think that's also good to know, because it's different from deriving insights from just raw data itself. A couple other things that I think are really cool to mention, that, and these are really things that I've just seen from other people's resumes that I thought were really impressive. Did you create a front end? If you did, mention the library framework. I would say that if you're going for more like back-end data jobs, this is a little bit less important, but I think throwing it in one project could be good to have, just so that they know that you might be able to communicate with a software engineer, something like that. SQL is something that we didn't really prioritize in our projects. If any of your projects that you use had multiple tables, I would say maybe go back and like throw it into a SQL database. A really easy one to do that for is that very first movies project. If you didn't use an API or anything, for the very first movies project, you can literally like pd.toSQL all of the tables and then just change some of your queries around such that they are SQL queries. That's something that a lot of students have gone back and did, just so you can have SQL as part of a project. Or for this project, if you're using a lot of data, maybe you just want to put it in a SQL, and then for your EDA, if you're EDAing like different subsets, you can query it from there. This one I really, really liked. So this actually came from one of my students who was like he actually was like a manager at like Amazon or something like that. And then he had that in one of his group projects for Flatiron School. And I thought that was really cool to have, that he mentioned that every day he checked in with his project partner, and I don't know if they really did or not, but he mentioned that they use like an agile, or I forget which one they did, but they mentioned the teamwork process, which I think is like, yeah, you don't really think of that, but where else on your resume would you highlight that other than like if you have relevant job experience? So I thought that was really cool. You can maybe look up and see like Agile or Scrum, which you're more confident in saying that you're doing that process. I think Agile is really just the stand-up process, and we do our stand-ups every week. So if you feel comfortable talking about the fact that you like checked in with someone on a daily basis in kind of like a stand-up way, maybe throw that in there if you can't think of anything to say. Dashboarding. If you are intending on at some point creating a dashboard, or if you just like at some point, I think in part of the post-work curriculum, which you'll get after you graduate, they show you how to do Tableau. There's like a mini Tableau tutorial, I think. Maybe just create some dashboard for something, because you can say that you designed and populated a dashboard. Or if you decide to do it for one of your own projects, you can do that. So yeah, these are kind of like the miscellaneous things, not necessary. A lot of these fall outside the scope of what a lot of these like straight out of Flatiron School jobs would have you do, but good to have just in case. So that's mainly like the stuff about how you would describe your projects. Again, feel free to send them over to me. I'm more than happy to like add my comments and nitpick at all the words. But I also wanted to mention like how you talk about how would you list Flatiron School on your resume? This is how I have it. I think it's up to you how you want to have it on your resume. I think that this is enough. I know some people like to say more things, like I think some people have a description of like the bootcamp covers like Python, covers machine learning, covers deep learning. So it's kind of up to you. Maybe you talk about that with your career coach. But I've had this and it's been good enough, I think. But yeah, these are like my tips. Feel free to draw inspiration from this. Let me know if you have any questions. If you're trying to decide between like phrasing things one way or another, more than happy to talk about that too. But yeah, any thoughts or questions?
I guess a very specific question about Tableau, and if you like seen that it's important during interviews, Is it something people ask about or is expected?
It's not expected, but a lot of jobs do like if you have visualization experience. So if you have, I think you do work with Tableau a little bit, right?
Yeah, like on a
Definitely.
daily basis. So that'd
Yeah,
be great.
definitely mention it because
Okay.
there's a lot of, it's kind of like in the same direction of like where you want to go anyways. Definitely mention Tableau. Put it, if not within a project, or maybe take some of your project's data and do your visualization on Tableau if you're already very familiar with throwing that together.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely do that, or put it in like the additional skills section, or like, yeah, you could do it in the technical skills, but I think like if you're very familiar with it and you can throw your project EDA onto Tableau, that'd be great.
Do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Of course. Anything else?
That was super helpful. Like I feel more comfortable with how to frame our projects in a really engaging way. So thank you, Ish.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, feel free to send over your resumes. I think like almost everybody in my last cohort sent me their resumes, and one very enlightening, and a lot of like the phrases that I got from here come from like things like, oh, I could definitely like phrase that way. So feel free to send them over. And I'm happy to like, if you want me to like take a specific perspective, let me know as well. And I can definitely nitpick like that as well.
Cool, for sure.
Amazing.
Oh, I have a question in regards to, so I know there's like advice on how to format it or like what you should prioritize. So I was kind of curious, like, should projects go on top or like work experience, and then like where should fall, I guess?
So I guess this one here has technical projects on top. I will say ever since, I think I used to have technical projects on top until I started working at this job, which was more relevant to the industry I wanted to be in. So then I switched it such that my work experience was on top.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm curious, like, so I'm like doing a internship right now, and so it's like relevant. So I'm like, should I put it on top and then put technical?
Okay.
And then someone else was saying that like, because so right now I have like my current experience, technical, and then like previous experience as a teacher beneath it. And so they were like, you should put all your work together and then put technical underneath. And I'm just like, but then I feel like my teaching isn't as relevant as.
Got it. Okay, I'll show you all my resume. I think that might maybe give like a perspective. I need to make sure my phone number is not gonna be on YouTube. So let me just crop it out there. Okay. So what I did actually, which I guess is also a good point to mention, is that my prior work experience was very not relevant to this industry. I like jumped around a bunch of different jobs that I did not like. But what I did, and this is one of them because I've since built up my work experience, but like what I did was this, for example, it was pretty much a sales job, but I didn't put that information there. Instead, I like really like thought about what I did at that job that could be very relevant to this. And I just phrased it in a way that sounded impressive. And so like, yeah, like with regards to any past experience, if you can really like pull out something that is more tech relevant, then do that and focus on that, I think. Yeah, because here it says database. It was an Excel sheet. Built chatbots. This was like a flow chart kind of thing. So yeah. Feel free. Yeah, I think prior to this, I definitely had my technical projects on top before because I had like all of my past experience was not relevant. So I tried to frame my past experience as like I am a good team player, that kind of stuff. And because I did not do that many quantitative things in the past.
Okay.
That's how I phrase it.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm gonna reshare this because I have a lot of anxiety about my resume being on on the YouTube. But yeah. Anything else? All right. Well, again, more than happy to look over resumes. I think it's not only helpful for you all, but also for me. I think I learned a lot just through looking at folks' resumes as well. But yeah, if there's nothing else, this is our last week of study group. So I'm excited for our last stand up on Wednesday. And then, yeah, it's just gonna be project reviews from there or one-on-ones. So please let me know if y'all need anything. And yeah, good luck. You're all on the finish, almost at the finish line.
Thanks, Yash.
Wish.
Yeah.
You're welcome. All right, I'll talk to y'all very soon.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of your night.
You too.